Luther found the lion as a child in the forest of Caliban, not as a Primarch, as a feral boy. He raised him, trained him, gave him a name, a code, and a purpose. He was the lion's father before the emperor even arrived, and the lion repaid him with exile. Then imprisonment, 10,000 years in a cell beneath the rock, while the chapter year helped him build Dauntless follows across the galaxy. This is not a story about chaos corruption, it's not a story about jealousy or an old man who couldn't handle being the second. This is a story about a system that took the man's loyalty, his service, his entire identity, and then discarded him. And what happened on Caliban was not a fall, it was a consequence. Caliban, a death world, forest so dense and dark they swallowed armies, beast, the great beast, that hunted humanity for millennia. And in the middle of this nightmare, an order of knights held the line, the order, and the greatest knight was a man called Luther. He was not a Primarch, he was not Gene Forge, he was a mortal man who had trained his body and mind to the absolute peak of humanity ability. He led the Order's most dangerous hunts. He killed beasts that had terrorized Caliban for centuries. He was, by every measure that mattered, extraordinary. And then one day, his knights found a child in the forest, a feral boy, golden-haired, silent, raised by the beasts, or something worse. Luther did not see a monster, he saw a warrior. He took the boy in and named him Lionel L. Jonson. Lion, the child of the forest. He trained him with a knightly heart. He taught him honor, discipline, loyalty. The lion became a man under Luther's guidance. They fought side by side, they purged the great beast together. They were in every way by blood, father and son. And then the emperor came. The lion's true nature was revealed, a Primarch, a demigod, the gene sword of the master of mankind. The emperor gave him the first legion, the Dark Angels, the template, the original Astartes, and then the lion ascended the heights Luther could never reach. But Luther stayed. He became the lion's second in command, his advisor, his most trusted lieutenant. He could not become a true Astartes because he was too old for the Gene Seed, but he fought alongside the Dark Angels across the great galaxy. He was there for every victory, every campaign, every triumph. And then Sarosh came. Sarosh, a world that had agreed to join the Imperium, diplomacy, ceremony, and beneath all, an assassination. A nuclear device was planted aboard the Lion's flagship, the Invincible Reason. Luther discovered it. At the seconds, he made a choice and he hesitated. One heartbeat. Maybe he was weighing the options. Maybe he was thinking about the lion coldness, about how the Primarch had changed, about how their relationship had grown distant. Maybe it was just the human instinct to freeze when the death is in front of you. The Lord does not give you these thoughts, He only gives you the result. The bomb was dealt with, but Luther has shown something the lion could not accept: uncertainty. The lion's judgment was absolute, no trial, no defense. Luther was stripped of his position and sent back to Caliban to train recruits, to wait, to be forgotten. Public exile, deliberate humiliation. The message was clear: you failed me. Luther took 500 Dark Angels back to Caliban with him. They were a training cadre, but in reality they were the men the lion wanted out of his sight. And for years, Luther trained Astartes for a legion that had no longer wanted him. He watched the lion legend grow from distance. Every victory, every honor, every laurel, Luther heard about them through reports and rumors. He had been the lion's father, and now he was a footnote. The resentment festered, and it was real, it was earned, it was human. And that is when the chaos found him. Caliban was never a normal world. Before the Emperor, before the Order, before humanity, something ancient and corrupt had seeded the planet. The taint ran through the forest, through the beasts, through the every stone. Luther had fought it in his entire life. He knew what chaos felt like, he knew how to resist. But then the whisper did not come with a temptation, they came with a validation. You were right, he abandoned you. You gave him everything and he discarded you like a broken blade. Chaos did not invent Luther's resentment. He found him waiting. He amplified what was already there. The hurt, the rage, the sense of injustice. He took a man who had been wronged and told him, your anger is righteous. And Luther believed it. He began to rally the Caliban garrison, not for Horus. Luther never swore allegiance to the War Master. This was not about the heresy, this was about Caliban, about independence, about a war that had been stripped of his identity by the Imperium, just as Luther had been stripped of his. He told his brother, when the lion returns, we will not bow, we will not be discarded a second time. When the Horus heresy ended and the lion's fleet finally returned to Caliban, after years of wars, after the death of the Emperor's dream, they were met with gunfire. Caliban's orbital defenses opened on a Dark Angel's fleet. It was not a greeting, it was a declaration. The lion descended onto the surface of Caliban in a cold rage. He found Luther waiting. Two men who had once been father and son, two warriors who had hunted beasts together, bled together, built a legend together, now standing on the opposite sides of a war who would never been happen. Luther spoke, perhaps he tried to explain, perhaps he demanded acknowledgement, decades of abandonment finally finding a voice. The lion did not listen. They fought. And this is the part the Imperium hates. Luther, juiced by chaos power he had not sought but had been given, power had flowed into the wounds he had not created. Luther matched a Primarch, blow by blow. The mortal knights held his ground against a demigod. The lion could not break him. In the end, Luther dealt the blow that should have ended it. A sorcerer of blast. Chaos channel wrote devastating that mortally wounded the Primarch, and the lion fell. And then Luther did something Chaos never expected. He stopped. He looked at the broken body of the boy he had raised, the man he had loved, the son who had exiled him, and the grief hit him like a physical blow. The rage drained him out of it. The chaos power bled away. In that moment, it was not a warlord. It was a father looking at what he had done to his child. The lion did not have the same hesitation. He struck Luther down with everything he had left. Luther's body broke. By the psychic backlash of the battle combined with the chaos taint already woven through the planet, and then the Dark Angel's fleet, still under fire, still enraged, bombarding the surface from the orbit, Caliban tore itself apart. The planet cracked, the warp swallowed most of it. What remained became the rock, the Dark Angel's fortress monastery, a drifting tombstone of a murdered world. Luther survived. The Dark Angels took him as prisoner. They locked him in the deepest cell of the rock, and there he has sat for 10,000 years. Now here's what the Imperium will never tell you. The Unforgiven, the Dark Angel's inner circle, have spent 10 millennia hunting the Fallen, every Dark Angel who was on Caliban during the Betrayal, every brother who sat with Luther. They hunt them not because the Fallen are a threat to the Imperium, but because the Fallen are the proof. Proof that the First Legion broke within. That the Lion's own chapter, his own homeworld, his own father turned against him. That the Dark Angels are not pure. That the Knights of Caliban are not above treason. The hunt of the Fallen is not justice, it is a shame management. Every captured Fallen is tortured in his confession, then executed. The Imperium must never know. The Inquisition must never suspect. Entire campaigns had been abandoned, allied force left to die so that a single Fallen could be captured in secret. And the worst part? The Lion returns in the 31st millennium, and after 10,000 years of sleep he wakes, and one of the first things he does is to forgive the Fallen. He calls them the reason. He says not all who stood with Luther were corrupted. Some were just loyal to Caliban. Some were just loyal to the men who had trained them. Some were just right. The Lion, the Primarch who exiled Luther without a trial, who never visited his cells, who never asked why. The Lion now admits what Luther said all along. That betrayal was not one-sided. The abandonment was real. And a man pushed far enough would push back. Luther's tragedy is that he was punished for being the one person who loved the Lion enough to demand better. He raised a demigod. He molded the first Primarch. He gave the Dark Angels their souls. And when he was discarded, not for treason but for hesitation, not for chaos but for one human heartbeat of doubt, he did what any father would do when their son refused to see them. He made himself impossible to ignore. The Imperium needs you to believe Luther was a traitor, a heretic, a fallen knight seduced by chaos, because if Luther was right, if the Lion's greatest failure was abandoning the man who made him, then entire Dark Angel's myth for incorruptible purity collapses. Then the hunt for the fallen is not a sacred duty, it's a cover-up. So they locked him in the deepest cell in the rock, not for chaos, for honesty. And now during the Hacks of Holman, he's on the loose, he escaped his cells, and the Lion has to decide whether to hunt him as an enemy or finally listen to what his father has been trying to say since Sarosh. So tell me in the comments, was Luther a traitor who got exactly what he deserved, or was your father the Lion who was never brave enough to face? As always, thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.